6 p.m. Eastern and polls are closed on the East Coast.
After 6 long weeks, it's over.
It all comes down to crucial battleground seats.
I know that I've done my best. I know I've left nothing on the field.
And I'm seeking that support because I know this country is facing some strong and difficult and challenging times.
We're going to go to Anthony Green, who has some early figures. The early results are coming in.
We're getting some numbers through. They're in very interesting seats.
Any surprises?
Well, we talked about the teal domination tonight.
Voters have turned to independence, a teal tidal wave.
Simply smashed through the benches of Parliament.
What we have achieved here is extraordinary.
Have you ever seen anything like this in an election before?
I think Christina Keneally might be in a bit of trouble at the moment.
I mean, that's just extraordinary for the coalition to lose seats to the Greens.
This is a very big moment.
A very big blow for the Liberal Party, losing Josh Frydenberg tonight.
It's definitely difficult. This has been a change election.
Breaking news for you right now, as we believe it is time to make a call.
Anthony Albanese to become Australia's 31st Prime Minister.
A Labor Party victory. The Labor Party will form government after this election.
Coalition cannot get into government. They are too far away from majority government. But at this stage, it's not clear what sort of Labor government we will get.
Tonight, I've spoken to the Leader of the Opposition and the incoming Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, and I've congratulated him on his election victory this evening.
My mother dreamt of a better life for me, and I hope that my journey in life inspires Australians to reach for the stars. Tomorrow, together, we begin the work of building a better future.
It felt like Labor spent 6 weeks of the campaign holding its breath, just hoping that there wouldn't be a 2019 all over again. And in the end, they were able to breathe out because the results were it wasn't even close.
That's right. Labor has won this election. Anthony Albanese will go down as a Labor great because any win from opposition is a huge feat. But the results are pretty fascinating, right? Clearly there was a visceral hatred of Scott Morrison and his 9-year-old government that was just past its use-by date. We saw well-heeled independents, teal independents becoming the giant killers of moderate Liberals in inner-city seats. The Greens finally delivered on the big claims they make before every election.
High water mark.
Very high water mark right now. But, you know, while it is a victory for Labor, hardheads in the party will be a little bit worried about the result because they won even though their primary vote went backwards.
This is really a victory of discipline, isn't it? They really took their medicine after the 2019 election, a much smaller policy platform. They weren't making it easy for the government to attack them. Were they energised by their policy platform? Perhaps as not as they have been in previous years. Are they overwhelmed by the victory? Of course they are.
And there some won't join them in government. Christina Keneally on the front bench, Terry Butler, both losing the seats that they had hoped to win. It leaves Anthony Albanese having to rearrange his front bench as he looks to put that stamp on what this new look Labor government will be doing.
Labor has the dual issues of gender and factions. It's got nearly gender equity in the party, so it needs to be ensuring that its front bench reflects that. Then it also has the right and the left faction to consider at the same time.
And the other consideration for Labor as well is what's happening with the Teals, the Teal independents. Yes, they got over the line, but a lot of those votes went to independents. They're not the only opposition in town really now, are they?
Anthony Albanese has officially been sworn in as Australia's 31st Prime Minister.
At Government House in Canberra this morning.
A new government, partly installed at least.
Anthony Albanese has declared the nation has voted for change.
And my government intends to implement that change in an orderly way. This morning, we had sworn in the interim ministry that you see before you here.
How are you feeling? Are you ready?
I'm ready.
No votes are still being counted. There's no clear outcome yet, but we have a new government and a new Prime Minister who we've just heard from, very keen to put his stamp on leading the nation.
Anthony Albanese visited the Governor-General this morning and within 2 hours' time was here holding his first press conference as Prime Minister, and there was an obvious change happening within the room. The Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flags were being added to the podium.
Yeah, normally you'd see 2 Australian flags in here. This was a choice that Labor has made in coming in, that it wants those 2 flags right there behind the new Prime Minister.
And on behalf of the Australian Labor Party, I commit to the Uluru Statement from the Heartland.
He's really emphasised the fact that a Labor government would look to have a referendum on adding a voice to Parliament as a key priority. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not the Liberal Party, the opposition, will get on board with that.
And so it's unusual we'd see just a few people get sworn in, but we've seen 5 get sworn in, and that's because Anthony Albanese and Penny Wong are now headed to the airport. It's very much about putting Australia back on the world stage with a new look government.
Have a good trip, Prime Minister.
It was wheels up to Tokyo.
Flying out to meet world leaders in Japan.
He and Foreign Minister Penny Wong flew out just a couple of hours after being sworn in.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is facing his first test on the world stage.
This is primarily a message of reassurance and continuity that Anthony Albanese is sending here to Japan, India and the United States.
You were sworn in, got in a plane, and if you fall asleep while you're here, it's okay.
What an entry into international politics for Anthony Albanese. It's actually his first full day officially as Prime Minister.
Yeah, he was only sworn in 9 o'clock Monday, and now this is a big day where he's going from one meeting to another. He's going to walk in here behind us, within a half an hour, and have the photograph with the other 3 leaders from the Quad. We know the big one is the bilateral meeting with Joe Biden, where they're going to talk about China, security, climate change, a lot on the agenda.
But the change of circumstance is quite incredible. We've got a situation where only 3-4 days ago, Anthony Albanese was tearing around school halls, cafes, clubs, in marginal electorates. Now he's Australia's man on the world stage.
Yeah, and look, it's going to be interesting to see the reception that he gets. We know that he's going to get along very well with Biden on climate change.
On climate change. I mean,
so
they're kind of bed partners there, aren't they?
They're on the same page, and I think that helps a lot.
We will act in recognition that climate change is the main economic and security challenge for the island countries of the Pacific. He's going to be using climate change, Anthony Albanese, to sort of heal relations with the Indo-Pacific too.
Yeah, and the other thing is that he's got this strong message about governance, about standing together with other democracies.
Quite a first day in office for Anthony Albanese.
Yeah, you betcha.
The coalition is picking up the pieces after its election loss.
Saturday's election loss continues to reverberate for the coalition.
Obviously, we've lost and we've been delivered a comprehensive message from parts of the community.
It was almost, visceral, that reaction.
Our party processes broke down, and that should not have happened.
The Liberal Party appears set to elect Peter Dutton as its new leader.
Why Peter Dutton?
He will be the leader.
We're not moderate Conservative Party, we're not the Conservative moderate party, we are the Liberal Party.
Scott Morrison was very quick out to both accept responsibility and say that he'd be stepping down as the Liberal leader. What was shocking was that the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, lost, meaning that he was the heir apparent to lead the Liberals in opposition. That's no longer going to happen. Peter Dutton emerges as basically the only candidate, and he's now tasked with trying to find the moderate base when he comes from a position of being a Conservative hardhead.
Yeah, he has the task now of rebuilding a shattered party and reconnecting with those voters who abandoned the party in droves. Now, Peter Dutton, he is a leading Conservative from Queensland. He's actually very well liked and respected within the party. He clearly has the numbers. But because he's held portfolios like defence, home affairs and immigration, he has sort of developed this real hard-headed image. And that is an image his own colleagues say is a massive problem.
It's interesting to see as well Peter Dutton repeating his playbook from when he went for the Liberal leadership last time, with spreads in the newspapers, pictures of his family saying, I'm looking forward to the Australian public seeing a different side of me. Now, it will take some time to turn that perception around, though.
And Susan Lee looks to be the next deputy leader. She's very much going to be tasked with trying to find the professional, moderate woman to get her back, both willing to vote for the Liberal Party, but also in the Liberal ranks. But you've also seen the broader moderate force come out saying, get out of people's bedrooms. Stop talking about social issues, stop talking about transcultural wars, and get focused on the economy and the aspirational Australian, because that's who they see is the voter they need to get back to government.
And one of the difficult things for Peter Dutton and the Liberals is once these inner city seats turn independent, they don't easily go back. And in some cases, they've gone from Liberal seats, skipped Labor, and gone to the Greens. Now, if they're not progressive on climate change, they're going to stick with Greens quite likely.
And if the Liberal Party can't find a way to win back these teal seats, its path back to government looks problematic, to say the least.
Almost impossible.
It means cutting into those Labor seats again and trying to win them back.
Nationals held all 16 of its lower house seats at the election.
The National Party could have a new leader as early as next week.
Do you think you should remain as leader?
Once more, I'm not going to suffer the sin of hubris and start saying what should or what shouldn't be the case.
Well, I'm considering it. I'll go for a long run today and think about it even more.
Barnaby Joyce is the leader. If Barnaby stands, I'll be supporting the leader.
It's expected Barnaby Joyce will face a contest.
Lucy, the National Party had quite an interesting turnout at this year's federal election, managing to hold on to all 16 lower house seats, yet there's still plenty of dissatisfaction with the party's performance.
That's right, Kath. So there have been swings against the party in a number of its seats.
Maybe the majority.
And that sparked questions around leadership and, of course, Barnaby Joyce's leadership. And they're meeting in Canberra on Monday to talk about it more.
Room behind us, in fact. What do you think will happen?
I mean, traditionally they spill the leadership positions. Usually the existing leader's re-elected unopposed. But what we're sensing at the moment is that will be different on Monday. That it's likely David Littleproud, the former Agriculture Minister, the deputy leader of the party, will probably put his name forward to contest.
Queenslander, I think, on the safest margin of anyone, maybe even in the parliament. But what's interesting, Luce, is that we heard from some within the party actually already speculating about a leadership spill in the weeks before the election results. So there's certainly been moves against Barnaby Joyce.
There's a whole lot of bitterness in the Nationals, and there has been for some time now. And I think what a lot of them are craving, or those who haven't necessarily been front and centre in those tussles, are just some stability.
There has been one constant in the Nationals Party over the past couple of parliaments, and that's uncertainty about what to do on climate change. And even though the party supports net zero by 2050, we've all of a sudden got this conversation happening one more time about whether or not the Nats are in lockstep with the electorate on this. And it was quite interesting to see some in the National Party say that perhaps there are Nats that need to take some responsibility for the loss of urban Liberals at the weekend.
Yeah, because they're saying it wasn't just Scott Morrison that was the problem. The teal independents who were successful were telling voters that a vote for the coalition in this seat is also a vote for Barnaby Joyce. And the moderates in the Liberals and the Nationals think that worked against the party.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, we're still getting used to saying that.
PM, welcome back.
Can you talk us through the last 5 days?
It was quite an extraordinary moment. It was overwhelming.
A whirlwind start for the new Prime Minister. But he's committed to his team to hit the ground running with Labor's agenda for government.
We've been basically joined at the hip since Sunday.
The Federal Treasurer has issued a grave warning about the state of the economy.
There's no use mincing words about that or tiptoeing around.
Strategic competition between Australia and China is intensifying.
Australia's new Foreign Minister Penny Wong begins her own Pacific Blitz.
Making a diplomatic dash to Fiji this morning.
We will stand shoulder to shoulder with you, our Pacific family, in response to this crisis.
We've just got through a marathon 6-week campaign. Everyone's exhausted, but Labor has hit the ground running. The ministers who have been sworn in so far have been locked in briefings really since Sunday. And I mean, if they thought the campaign was hard, well, government is going to be all that much more difficult because we are entering some really troubling and difficult economic and strategic times.
Yeah, and one of the most difficult challenges that a government can deal with is how does it respond to a resurgent China that is really flexing its muscles in the Pacific. Just think back to what Penny Wong said in the campaign when Beijing signed a security deal with Solomon Islands. They said, this is one of the biggest foreign policy failures of a generation. Now there's a real prospect that China wants 10 of these deals with other Pacific Island nations. She's going to have to be across her brief and up to this from day one.
And it's why she was so quickly to the Pacific after the Quad meeting, right? Out there talking about Australia's approach to climate change, wanting to be close allies with the Pacific, more about the Pacific, less about Paris. And you can see that change has come to Australia. The face of Australia on the world stage is a queer woman with an Asian Australian background. But back home, it's a nightmare that they're inheriting. Stagnant wages, soaring inflation, unaffordable housing. This next term of Parliament is going to be tough.
There is massive debt that won't be paid off for a generation. There are huge deficits that will constrain Labor's ability to spend. So what we saw from Jim Chalmers was also a great deal of expectation management. There might be high hopes that there is a new government, but there isn't a whole lot that this new government can do to solve the many problems Australia is facing.
Sure, we spent almost a decade complaining about structural problems in the economy, and now we're in power. Don't be coming to us if they're not solved in the first year of government.
Well, and Anthony Albanese pledged he would do politics differently. The nation has voted and said, we want change. Following through on that change is now the obstacle that he and Labor has to face.